All right, as you've heard, the finger of blame is being pointed squarely at BC Premier John Horgan by both the feds and Alberta. He's expected to make a public statement later today, but his partner in power is the Green Party, and the leader of that party is Andrew Weaver, and he joins us from beautiful Victoria. Mr. Weaver, Premier Horgan declaring he's entirely within his rights to try and block this pipeline. Pretty clear, falls within the realm of a project in the national interest. Why bother delaying the inevitable and forcing taxpayers to pick up the tab?
Well, here's the problem with that approach. Number one is what has not been said is there's quite a number of cases before the court now involving Indigenous communities across British Columbia who are concerned about their constitutional rights. The Premier has frankly done nothing to stall the case. All he has done is say that he was going to put together a scientific panel, number one, and second, to put a reference case before the BC Court of Appeal to determine whether or not they have the jurisdictional right to be able to regulate a substance like diluted bitumen across their boundary because of the concerns over a diluted bitumen spill. What's going on really here is that Mr. Trudeau and his government realize that they're on the wrong side of this. They're on the wrong side of this, and they have been since day one because of their horse trading silliness to try to argue that we need a climate plan, and to get a climate plan, we need to build a pipeline. Like, go figure that one out. And he recognizes that the process was flawed. He recognized that early on, said in the campaign that it was flawed and he'd move away from it. Didn't do that, but did in other cases like Energy East. Now Kinder Morgan's looking for an exit strategy because we now have Keystone XL and Line 3 being approved. The Asian markets for diluted bitumen have collapsed. They don't exist. The only market would be California, and the reality is those other pipelines would feed it. So we see an exit strategy playing out. We see the federal government who's boxed themselves into a corner and now are blaming BC for their, frankly, incompetence in dealing with this issue. And that's wrong, and we deserve better from a federal government.
You know, the way I recall it, even the BC NDP Attorney General was told the government can't beat the Constitution on this question. Again, I guess I got to ask you, how do you justify a delay that's going to cost an awful lot of money for taxpayers in the end, and it'll still go ahead?
Well, first off, it should cost no money for taxpayers, and the real question is, what sort of reckless approach to finances are we taking federally, where we're potentially offering an indemnity to investors in a particular project? I'd love it if they offered an indemnity every time I bought a stock or share in Microsoft, or perhaps I'm buying a stock in a forest company. Governments do not offer indemnities to investors in industrial activities. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that we're actually having this conversation, that somehow that there's a duty for the taxpayers to bail anyone out. We know in any project there's risks. Investors know when they invest in a company, there are risks associated with that. Anybody who's invested for a long time knows that there are winners and losers. Sometimes their investments go sour, sometimes they don't. And they know the risk that they're taking when they go down that path. The problem here is that Trudeau and his government have been reckless in their promising. They've been chest beating. They have not been on the ground here. And now they're realizing that Quebec is with BC on this. And this is an utter infringement on the rights of the province to simply ask the question whether we have the jurisdictional responsibility or ability to protect our citizens from a diluted bitumen spill. It's very dangerous what Mr. Trudeau is doing.
I'm guessing really that there's no backing down from the BC position anyway. If Horgan folds his tent on this, you'll pull the rug out from under his government. Am I reading that right?
You don't need to read that because the BC NDP and the BC Greens are completely united on this. It's not as if Horgan pulls his tent, we'll throw the government down. There's no question he's not going to, because they campaigned on this, as did we, and we recognize this was a shared value, that we have a responsibility as elected leaders to ensure that the interests of our citizens are put front and center. That is, we have a duty and a responsibility to protect them. Again, I come back to the same issue I've raised time and time again. We're not talking about shipping oil. We're not talking about shipping gas. We're not talking about shipping diesel. We're talking about shipping diluted bitumen, a product that must be refined elsewhere, and a product that we know when it gets into the coastal environment, because of the evaporation of the lighter elements of that required to make bitumen flow in pipes, that the stuff sinks and it can't be cleaned up. That's the problem, and that's the problem we want to deal with.
Quick final question. Today, the Alberta government's going to pass a bill that will allow them to turn down the taps on gas and oil exports to BC specifically. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we know that that is actually unconstitutional, And if they try to implement that, this is all chest beating in the lead up to an Alberta election, and shame on that, because citizens deserve better. We know that most of BC's gasoline products will come from the Cherry Point refineries. Again, it's shipping gasoline, it's not shipping diluted bitumen. This is just next door to Washington. And I feel very confident that the governor of Washington, who has stood forward with British Columbia and say we don't want diluted bitumen increases in our coastal waters, will actually ensure that British Columbia gets it. The real question here is that this is an incredible opportunity for BC to implement its climate plan. And the irony is just this. Trudeau is going to war with the one province in this country that is actually showing leadership on the climate change greenhouse gas mitigation file, which he is trying to get others to go in. One that's already agreed to a $50 carbon tax. This will actually push for the electrification of our vehicular sector in BC, and once more will lead the country in innovation, and that is an exciting thing.
All right, got to leave it there. Andrew Weaver, thanks for joining us. Appreciate this.
Pleasure. Thank you, Don.